Hey, if you've ever felt like motherhood is this like just incredible, messy journey, sometimes isolating too,
Yeah.
where you're juggling all these feelings and constantly wondering, like, am I even doing this right?
Right.
Take a breath.
Yeah.
Because the book that we're exploring today, Rage, Anxiety, and All the Feels, it really speaks to that feeling.
Right.
Right on the welcome page, you are absolutely not alone.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something just being cold in a million directions. The sheer weight of it all, it's so common. It's like the universal thread of motherhood.
Mm.
And it's so important, like you were saying, to validate that intensity right from the get-go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really at the core of what we're doing here with this deep dive. We want to extract the most valuable insights
Mm.
and the truly practical tools from this book to help you, our listener, feel less like you're on an island and more empowered in your day-to-day life, We're moving beyond that picture-perfect image of this all-encompassing village and focusing on the very real, everyday experiences and the actionable solutions that are presented here.
Yeah, because for so many, that picture-perfect village, it just doesn't exist.
Right.
So really understanding these sort of fundamental experiences, the anger, the anxiety, the deep need for connection, like that's what we're aiming for today.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Starting with something I think resonates really deeply with many parents. Even if it's not always talked about openly, mom rage, you know, the book describes it as these sudden, really overwhelming flashes of anger that lead to yelling or snapping, quickly followed by that wave of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really that real talk in chapter 1 that acknowledges that experiencing this doesn't make you a bad mom. It makes you a human being under a ton of pressure.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And what I really appreciate is how the book frames this. It's not a personal failing, right?
Hmm.
It's actually a very, very common response to chronic
Mm.
stressors. Like it normalizes these explosive moments
Hmm.
by suggesting that they're really a symptom of the pressures that mothers face.
Right. And the why section digs into those root causes
Yeah.
like persistent stress, the sleep deprivation, which feels like a universal experience in parenthood, overstimulation, those often unmet emotional needs, and that feeling of isolation that can be so pervasive. The book points out that there's often this unspoken societal expectation for mothers to exhibit endless patience without the same support systems that might have existed in the past, like, those historical shifts in family structure
Yeah.
and community support. It makes you wonder how much they've contributed to this pressure.
Absolutely. It's like if you zoom out
Yeah.
and look at the bigger picture, it
Yeah.
really underscores a structural challenge.
Hmm.
Modern mothers are often trying to manage these incredibly demanding roles without traditional safety nets.
Hmm.
And that constant emotional and physical load, it has to go somewhere.
It does. And the impact of this bottled up mom rage, as the book explains, can manifest in really detrimental ways. It can turn inward, leading to feelings of shame or even symptoms of depression or anxiety. Or it can erupt outward as yelling or overly harsh discipline or even emotional withdrawal. And it's not just affecting the mother. Children are so attuned to that underlying tension, even if they can't articulate it. And it takes a toll on the mother's well being too,
Yeah.
contributing to exhaustion and resentment.
That's a really important point. How do we interrupt that cycle? And I think the book does a great job of illustrating how interconnected those internal struggles are
Yeah.
and their external impact on the family dynamic.
Yeah, and to really highlight how widespread this experience is, the book includes these anonymized real-life voices. We hear things like, I actually threw a shoe across the room once. It wasn't intentional. I was just so utterly depleted, and it felt like I was carrying everything alone. Wow. Or another mom shared, before motherhood, anger wasn't really a part of my emotional landscape. Now there are times when I feel like a completely different person. And these raw accounts underscore that message. You're not broken. You're burned out, and you are not alone.
Yeah. What I love about those quotes is just the honesty.
Ah.
There's no attempt to sugarcoat it. And I think that's so important for taking away that stigma,
Mhm.
so other mothers can read that and think, wow, that's me.
Totally. And then the book guides us towards the shift, encouraging this movement away from just reacting in anger and towards responding more intentionally.
Mm.
And there's this really important distinction. Anger itself, it's a normal human emotion.
Right.
It's the handling of it that really matters.
All right.
So the book encourages us to become more attuned to those early warning signs, that tightening in your chest, that shallow breath, clenching your jaw,
Mm.
creating that tiny window for intervention.
That's key, right? Recognizing those physical signals so you can pause before the anger takes over.
Right.
The little space between the feeling and the action.
Exactly. And then there's the practice section, which provides some very concrete strategies, like consciously naming your rage with a grounding sentence.
Yeah.
Utilizing that 4-7-8 breathing technique to calm your nervous system,
Mm.
which helps activate that parasympathetic response.
Yeah.
the rest and digest part of your nervous system,
Mm,
creating a rage plan with 3 specific go-to actions that you can take,
I love that.
and even establishing a safe space signal with your family so they know when you need a moment. Having those predetermined responses in your rage plan, it can really prevent those knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah. Yeah, they're practical. They're simple,
Yeah.
even in the chaos of everyday life.
Exactly. Okay, so let's move on to another really significant part of the motherhood experience, anxiety.
Hmm.
Chapter 2 delves into this. Acknowledging those racing thoughts, the worries that keep you up at night, the endless mental checklists, daycare decisions, whether you're parenting correctly, if your kids are getting enough nutrients,
Yeah.
It's that real talk of lying in bed exhausted, but your mind just won't switch off. Ugh. Yeah. And the book points out that anxiety thrives in the unknown,
Yeah.
and motherhood is absolutely filled with that.
So true.
And that feeling of not having that built-in support system,
Hmm.
it can amplify those worries,
Mm,
making them feel so much bigger.
absolutely.
And the why section offers this deeper understanding of why anxiety is so prevalent for parents. It's not solely down to hormonal shifts,
Hmm.
although they play a role, especially in the postpartum period. It's also the sleep deprivation, the profound shifts in identity that motherhood brings,
Hmm.
the social isolation, and that immense responsibility for the safety and well-being of another human being.
Yeah. It's a lot to carry.
It is. And then there's this added layer of guilt that I think many mothers experience around their anxiety. Almost like if you're feeling anxious, you're not fully embracing or enjoying motherhood.
Right.
But the book makes this important point that joy and worry, they can and often do coexist. And then there's the impact of social media. It's so easy to fall into that comparison trap when you're constantly exposed to curated online portrayals of family life, these perfect moments. It can really create this illusion of constant bliss that just isn't the reality of parenting.
Totally. It sets up this unrealistic benchmark, making moms feel like they're falling short when their lived experience doesn't match up.
Yeah. And the consequences of unchecked anxiety, as the book details, can be significant. Disrupted sleep, difficulty concentrating, strained relationships with your children,
Yeah.
increased irritability, perfectionism, and ultimately burnout. It even touches on this concept of high functioning anxiety, where outwardly someone might seem to have it all together, but internally they're experiencing a great deal of turmoil.
Right. And that gap between what it looks like
Oh,
and the internal reality can be really isolating. You don't have to be visibly struggling
yeah.
to be dealing with serious anxiety.
And like the chapter on rage, chapter 2, includes these incredibly relatable real life voices. I literally wake up every day with a mental list of at least 100 things I'm worried about, or no one told me I'd be genuinely afraid to even leave the house for weeks.
Wow.
And I honestly thought I was completely alone in feeling this way.
It's a powerful stuff.
It is. It reinforces that message. You are not experiencing this in isolation.
It's so validating to hear those shared experiences. It breaks down that feeling of being alone
Hmm.
and opens up the conversation.
And in The Shift, the book emphasizes that we can't control every single outcome, but
Yeah.
we absolutely can influence our relationship with uncertainty.
That's huge.
It is. And it's about consciously trying to shift from that fear-based thought process to a more grounded sense of presence. And the book even suggests asking yourself, is this worry actually true? Is dwelling on it helpful? Is this a kind thought towards myself?
Ooh, I like that.
And if the answer is no to any of those, gently try to release that worry. It's such a useful filter
Yeah.
to apply to those spiraling thoughts. And then in the practice section, there's some really practical strategies for managing that anxiety.
Yeah.
Creating a control inventory to differentiate between what you can control and what you can't.
Mhm.
Focusing on identifying daily wins. Consciously noting 3 positive things that happened each day. Utilizing the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique to bring you back to the present moment, and even implementing a designated worry window,
Oh, yeah.
a specific time each day to acknowledge and process your worries so they don't bleed into the rest of your day.
I love the worry window idea. It's like giving your anxiety its own designated space so it doesn't take over everything else.
Exactly. Okay, so let's transition now to a topic that I think resonates deeply with so many parents, especially those who feel like they're navigating this journey with limited support.
Yeah.
The idea of building your village. Chapter 3 tackles this feeling of not having that traditional, readily available village
Mm-hmm.
and the resulting isolation that many modern mothers experience. And it starts with that real talk about, the lack of casseroles showing up at your door
Right.
or offers of regular babysitting. The book acknowledges these significant shifts in family structures and societal support systems,
Uh,
and how the expectation of this readily available village often just doesn't match up with reality.
right. For so many people.
Yeah. But the why section offers this really encouraging perspective. It emphasizes that having support isn't just a nice bonus,
Hmm.
it's fundamental for lowering stress levels and reducing the risk of burnout. And it's not about the quantity of people in your circle, it's about the quality of those
It's
connections.
such an important distinction. Right. It reframes that concept of village from
Yes.
this big, ever-present entity to a few key individuals who offer that really genuine support and understanding.
Yes. And the book outlines the benefits of having a solid support system, having people you can emotionally vent to,
Oh.
people you can ask for advice from without judgment. Celebrate your wins with people to help you build your resilience and ultimately parent with more confidence. And then on the flip side, the impact section discusses how social isolation can increase stress levels and make it so much harder to cope with the daily challenges of parenting.
For sure.
And it thoughtfully points out how actively seeking help and support can actually serve as a positive model for our children.
Oh, that's interesting.
Teaching them it's okay to need assistance
Yeah,
and that building strong relationships is a valuable life skill.
it was important.
It is. And
Right.
again, we hear those real life voices, moms who have found their village in all different forms, whether it's local mothers groups,
Oh, yeah.
online communities, or even just that one incredibly supportive friend who consistently checks in.
Yeah.
And it demonstrates that villages can take all different shapes and sizes.
It's so encouraging, right, to see those examples and realize that it's possible,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't look like the traditional idea.
Exactly. And then the practice section offers some really actionable steps for actually creating your own support system, taking the time to create a people inventory,
Okay.
a list of people you genuinely trust, and feel comfortable with setting a connection goal to reach out to at least one person on that list each week.
I love that.
Exploring local and virtual communities specifically for mothers, and even initiating help swaps with other parents where you can mutually support each other with things like childcare or other needs.
It's about being intentional.
Right. It is.
And taking those small steps
Yeah.
towards building those connections.
And that help swap idea, it really fosters that sense of mutual support and reciprocity.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we're at Chapter 4, Mindful Parenting.
Yes.
And this approach is all about consciously shifting from reacting to our children's big emotions and, sometimes challenging behaviors
Uh-huh.
to responding with greater intention and awareness.
Yeah.
It's that real talk moment
Yeah.
where we acknowledge that we may have envisioned ourselves as these calm and collected parents.
Right.
But the reality often involves toddler meltdowns and bedtime battles, so much more.
Oh, yeah.
The idea is to prioritize presence over perfection.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about never feeling frustrated or upset, but about being aware of our own emotional state
Mm-hmm.
and making a conscious choice
Yes.
to respond in a more thoughtful and considered way.
Yeah. And the why section really highlights the benefits of this approach. It can improve emotional regulation skills for both the parent and the child,
Yeah.
significantly reduce parental stress,
Uh-huh.
strengthen that parent-child connection, and it even touches upon this concept of reparenting ourselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
Given that many of us weren't raised with these more mindful approaches to emotions and behavior.
Right. It's like breaking those cycles.
Yes, it
Right.
is. And the book emphasizes that our children don't actually need perfect parents.
Thank goodness.
I know.
What they really thrive on is having parents who are present and connected and just modeling calmness in those challenging moments
Mm-hmm.
and making an effort to repair things after a conflict. That goes such a long way in building emotional safety.
It does. And the impact section highlights how these mindful responses can contribute to a more peaceful and emotionally secure home environment
Yeah.
and foster a greater sense of self-trust in our own parenting abilities. It's about creating an atmosphere where all feelings are acknowledged and validated, and mistakes are seen as opportunities for learning and connection.
So powerful.
It is. And we get those real-life voice examples again, what mindful parenting actually looks like.
Yeah.
Simple things like taking a deep breath before reacting, actively naming the emotions your child might be experiencing,
Yeah.
making a genuine effort to apologize after you've made a mistake. These everyday examples really make the concept feel less abstract and more like something attainable.
It makes it real.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Yeah. And then the practice section offers those tangible techniques that you can start incorporating, things like the pause plus breathe technique, emotion naming with your children, using a body scan as a grounding exercise,
Hmm.
establishing mindful mornings, incorporating moments of quiet presence before the day begins,
I like that.
implementing a repair ritual after conflict to restore connection and teach reconciliation, you know? These techniques provide a framework for weaving mindfulness into your daily interactions.
Yeah. Especially that repair ritual. Such a powerful tool for teaching kids
Yeah.
about taking responsibility and making amends.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about something that's often easier said than done, especially in the whirlwind of motherhood, self-care.
Ooh, yeah. The big one.
Chapter 5 gets real about the challenges of prioritizing self-care as a busy mom, especially when that village feels more like a fantasy.
Yeah.
And it moves beyond those images of spa days and bubble baths and focuses on small, daily, realistically achievable rituals.
Yes, please.
I know. You know, the real talk here is so relatable, that feeling of what even is self-care when you barely have a moment to yourself. You know, maybe not even to use the bathroom in peace.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
true.
Right. The book challenges those often unrealistic notions of self-care
Uh-huh.
and centers it on those fundamental everyday needs and those small acts of self-preservation that are actually within reach.
Yeah.
The why section makes it clear that self-care isn't a luxury, it's a necessity
It really is.
for our well-being and our ability to parent effectively.
Mm.
And it includes those small but vital actions, like drinking enough water
Yes.
or saying no when you're overwhelmed, you know, and it also highlights the negative consequences of neglecting our own needs.
Yeah. Like what happens when we run ourselves completely empty?
Exactly. Increased irritability,
Yeah.
brain fog, decreased energy.
Yeah.
And then it emphasizes the positive effects of those small, consistent acts of self-care over time.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's not about these grand gestures. It's the little things.
Yeah. And there's a crucial reminder to remember your identity outside of mom.
So important.
You know, nurturing those other facets of yourself.
Yes.
It's vital for your well-being and your sense of self.
Because motherhood is a huge part of who we are. But it's not all of who we are.
It's not. And we hear from those real-life voices again, sharing examples of realistic self-care. Drinking a full glass of water first thing in the morning,
Love it.
putting on some uplifting music while doing chores,
Yeah.
taking a few moments to practice gratitude.
Nice.
You know, it shows that self-care doesn't have to be this elaborate, time-consuming thing
Right.
to be beneficial.
It's finding those little pockets of
Yeah.
nourishment throughout the day.
And then the practice section provides strategies for making self-care a reality, creating a non-negotiables list,
Okay.
identifying those daily needs that you absolutely have to prioritize,
Mm-hmm.
developing a joy menu, a list of small, enjoyable activities that you can turn to for a boost,
Love that.
conducting energy check-ins throughout the day to assess how you're doing and what you need, and using a boundary script to assert your needs and limitations. You know, these tools offer a framework for actually prioritizing self-care and
Yes.
integrating it into your routine instead of seeing it as this occasional guilt-ridden indulgence.
Right. It's not selfish. It's essential.
Exactly. And that boundary script can be so empowering.
Totally.
Okay, so finally, let's delve into Chapter 6, Healing Yourself While Raising Happy Kids. This chapter acknowledges the profound way that motherhood can bring up our own personal wounds and patterns from the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it emphasizes the bravery and the impact of trying to raise emotionally healthy children
Right.
while simultaneously working on our own healing journey.
It's powerful stuff.
It is, and it highlights that intergenerational effect,
Yeah.
you know, that ripple effect that our own healing can have.
That's so true.
And the book reframes healing not as a destination of perfection, but as an ongoing process of cultivating self-awareness, intentionality in our actions, and responsiveness in our parenting.
Yeah. It's a journey.
It is, and it acknowledges the challenges of doing this deep work while also meeting the demands of raising children.
Right.
But it underscores the transformative potential that even just becoming more aware of our patterns can have
Totally.
in starting to break those negative cycles.
It's like you're not only working on yourself, but you're also modeling that for your kids.
Yes, you are. And the impact section discusses how the process of healing while parenting can be incredibly challenging at times. But it highlights that even those small conscious acts
Mm-hmm.
of pausing before reacting, Making an effort to apologize when we've messed up, simply sitting with our children in their big emotions.
Yeah.
Even if that wasn't something we experienced in our own upbringing.
Right.
These are actively rewriting those negative patterns in real time.
It's amazing to think about that ripple effect.
It is. And we hear those real life voices, again, moms who are actively engaged in their healing while raising their children.
Mhm.
Stories of consciously choosing to sit with a crying child, even though their own upbringing didn't allow for that,
Oh.
working to understand the roots of their anger,
Uh,
making a consistent effort to apologize to their children when they've made a mistake.
those are such powerful examples.
They are. It shows that even deeply ingrained patterns can be shifted.
Yeah, with effort and self-compassion.
Yes. And the practice section provides concrete tools to support this process.
Okay, like what?
Using a trigger tracker to identify the situations or words that tend to set you off.
Uh-huh.
Implementing those repair rituals we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Practicing regular inner child check-ins to connect with and nurture our own past experiences.
That's so powerful.
It is. And using a mindful pause script to create that moment of reflection before reacting.
I love that.
Yeah. These tools offer a way to identify our triggers, address past wounds, and ultimately respond to our children with greater awareness, compassion, and intention.
So much good stuff in there.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into rage, anxiety, and all the feels, I think the biggest takeaway is that you're not alone,
Yes,
in navigating the emotions and the challenges of motherhood.
absolutely. And the book really serves as this reminder to extend self-compassion to yourself
Yes.
and to acknowledge the incredible, often unseen work that mothers do every single day.
So true.
And it reinforces the idea that seeking knowledge and trying new approaches,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a sign of weakness. It's a testament to your strength and the depth of your love for your children.
And I love how the book concludes, you are already the right mom for your children.
Yes, you are.
So on that note, maybe this week you could take a moment to reflect on one small act of self-care that you can do,
Yeah,
or one tiny step you can take towards building a stronger connection with someone in your life.
great idea.
Just a little something to keep the conversation going
Yes.
and continue exploring these concepts
Well, I
in
hope
your
so.
own life.